Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready to proceed with the second part of the meeting. For those, so we're repeating the apologies. We've had an apology from Philip Tucker for those that weren't at the start. Surely I don't need to repeat the chair's announcements, do I? No, good. The agenda has got the wrong order. We'll go to the minutes before we deal with matters arising. So we'll go straight to item 7 and to the minutes. Now, start off by saying you've got the minutes. Can we agree them as being a correct record of the meeting? And we know that that's not the case.
John, sorry,
yes.
Sorry. Sorry, am I putting words in your mouth?
No, I think you need to introduce it.
I have proposed an amendment to the minutes.
Yep.
Which specifically focuses on you've got the minutes pack on your desk.
Yes, actually.
And the proposed amendment is the last 2 pages of that. It didn't come with your documents. And it deals with the fact that, in my view, we made a decision at the last meeting to give approval to funding for Great St Mary's, subject to allocating funds for 2 other community feasibilities projects that are in the pipeline, and in order to protect funding for those. Because I think it is, I won't give the reasons why, I think we discussed that at the last minute. So it's just simply a matter of trying to determine what the record is. And I have got a couple of other just small points which I just believe tidied up a little bit. But for example, the lighting on Land's Land was not just in the middle. But I think the main point, I think we've discussed variously on email, was about this question of whether we allocated funding for these 2 community facilities, albeit we weren't able to determine them as projects able to go, but we were able to allocate funding.
Yes.
And our approval for Great St Mary's,
yes,
in my mind, was contingent upon that allocation and that protection of funding for other projects.
Right. We've for members of the public observing this, they won't understand perhaps what's going on. But we had a long meeting at the last occasion, and I think some of us lost concentration and perhaps didn't have a clear idea of what was finally agreed. But I'm convinced by Sian Reid that her wording certainly reflects what was intended. And I think I've heard members discussing these that we're not going to disagree with the reworded minutes with regard to developer contribution item. Can I ask for a show of hands to agree the minutes as amended? Yes. Right, thank you.
And the other points as well.
Yes, yes. That being the case, can we go to the minutes? And sorry, so the agenda order is in the wrong order, and I haven't asked for declarations of interest for the rest of the meeting. Are there any? No, that's fine. And I should also point out that Richard Taylor, as is his wont, is filming the meeting. Should anybody feel that they're being filmed and don't want to, they can either move or remonstrate with Mr. Taylor and ask him to stop pointing his camera at them. The best defence we find is to really spin the meeting out a long time until his batteries fail.
Oh, no, that's contrary to the whole spirit.
Right, so come on, let's concentrate. We've agreed to the minutes. Can we ask for any matters arising from the minutes? And I know there are a couple.
I just wanted to follow up on the point in relation to the West Cambridge Sports Centre. I think it was Mr. Taylor who raised the issue. I think the general view of the committee was that it should be taken up with officers. I did take the opportunity to take it up with officers. A letter has been written to the university in relation to the breach of its condition. It's on record now that I'd like to add it to the minutes of this meeting, so it's on public record. I have a copy here. And the council met the university on a number of occasions post that meeting to discuss that condition, and in particular in relation to access to the facility for members of the community and the basis of that access. It's basically about how much people pay and when they're allowed to use the facility and so forth. The university is pulling together a proposal for us, and we're hopeful that we're able to reach agreement over the course of the next month, such that in the new year the university would introduce the new arrangements. We do have the option, Chair, within the Section 106 on the Northwest Cambridge side. The reason why this came around was that the sports facility, indoor sports facility on the Northwest Cambridge side, we took a view that we would agree to the university's proposal to basically not have an indoor facility at the Northwest Cambridge site, but have it on the West Cambridge site, and that's the university's plans. But we do have a condition that if we are not satisfied with the arrangements, we can basically, under the Section 106, insist that the university have an indoor facility on the Northwest Cambridge site.
Okay, thanks for bringing us up to date. There was a second point raised by Richard Taylor again regarding the opening of a bin at Parker's Peace, commemorating the FA rules. And the question was how it got there. And we've done some research, and David Princeps, who has been appointed by the council to, he's a senior officer himself, to be the sort of the godfather to this particular committee, and is going to just say a word, because you've done some digging. And what ghastly thing have you dug up?
Okay. This wasn't actually a commemorative bin. It was a try of a new bin that we were thinking of using in other places. At the same time that it was decided to try a bin, it was also decided to try and use the bins as a way of informing the public about a particular location in the city. So this particular bin was used to inform the public about Parker's Peace and its relationship to the FA rules. So it wasn't commemorative in the way which was described in the press. The timing coincided with discussions and publicity around the public art for the commemoration of the FA rules. And that's the reason the bin was here. It was purely a trial. And at the moment we're not proposing to use those bins with the placards across the city elsewhere.
Right, thank you very much. Now, I don't think I've spotted any other matters arising. Has anybody else got anything that they wish to bring up from the minutes? No? In that case, we'll go on to the open forum, where we invite the public to ask questions, but we must restrict this to an absolute maximum of 30 minutes, especially considering how late we're running. We have two speakers who registered early to speak. First of them being Mr. Mark Reeder.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Mark Reeder, a resident of Castle Ward and activist there. I'm speaking about the second round priority setting for the developer contributions of St. Augustine's Church, which is in Castle Ward. St. Augustine's is a thriving community hub which hosts concerts, parties, talks and so on. It caters to, among other groups, to nursery groups, adult learners and the elderly. And they are seeking a community facilities grant of £100,000 to provide additional meeting and event space, upgrade the kitchen, and provide enhanced storage, as well as remodeling the entrance and providing a disabled accessible toilet. There will be extra demand for community facilities, will be seen from the Darwin Green development, and also it's been mentioned to me in campaigning that there is a need for community and activities for the elderly in the area, which and to meet this need, the development will permit coffee mornings on some days each week, which will complement the existing monthly lunch club. It will also provide, as I mentioned, disabled access and enhanced community representation. The development as proposed is a staged process, so that depending on the success of funding, the whole thing would be completed. And currently the £100,000 would be joined with £25,000 from the church, and also leaving £175,000 to be raised to complete the whole development, so £300,000 in total. Given the number of elderly and the need in the area, given the number of elderly and need in the area, as well as the community use, I commend this to you for priority setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I think those points are all fairly well understood by the committee already, and we'll certainly be dealing with those in detail shortly. The second speaker is Mr. Gratis. Gatis. Oh yes, it's spelled wrong here. Please, what would you like to tell us about it?
I'm hoping to, I think I can speak loud enough without that. I'm hoping that the committee might initiate...
Sorry, they won't hear you at the back. Without the
We
microphone.
will, but people in the audience won't.
I'm hoping, I think...
Put it close to your mouth, please.
I'm hoping, I think, to persuade the committee to initiate a study into a concern that I've got via the council officers. Pass these around. I did pass it into the council offices earlier this week.
But please proceed.
Okay. If you go to the second page, you'll see a photograph at the top of the passageway between Warwick Road and Windsor Road. You can see the entrance, which is by the Mayfield School and the roundabout playgroup, which is adjacent to this exit. What you will also see is that there is a post at the end of a 5-foot fence, and you've got the end of the railing, which provides a 3-foot gap. People coming from Mayfield end go at right angles to the railing, and the cyclists coming down the footpath are at right angles to them as they come. And there's a blind spot there. If you turn to the other page, that's the last page, you'll see a lady with a buggy who is about to enter the space, the passageway, and at the bottom you'll see the view of a cyclist as he's approaching the lady with the buggy. Now, a second later, the lady is going to go into that blind spot, and there will be potentially a bad accident. I haven't canvassed people directly as to how many accidents or potential accidents there are at this spot, but my friend Mervyn Rogers actually came down with a bicycle approaching that point, and a little kid of 3 on one of these wooden foot-pushed tricycles went right in front of him. He put his brakes on, hit him, knocked him to the ground, and he fell off and fell on top of him. Unfortunately, nobody was hurt. A neighbour, Janet Dunn, got knocked down by a cycle there, and she was not injured, but she was completely knocked down, and the cyclist went over the handlebars. I have had 2 encounters where I've nearly been knocked at that particular point. On the first page, there's a copy of a letter that I sent to the planning officer 2.5 years ago. It was a letter which was initiated because there was a planning application at that particular spot for some houses. I've omitted the bits that relate to the planning application, but the rest of it stands. I didn't get a reply to this from the planning officer. Mrs. Dunn wrote to the council about her accident, and she got a reply saying nothing could be done. So my feeling is that the committee, what I would ask the committee to do would be to say eventually that this is a point which definitely needs some attention after the officers have investigated it and reported back to you. What I would like to see is that the council negotiates with the owner of the 5-foot fence, and that my suggestion, but there are other suggestions which would come up from the investigation, would be that the council then erects at its own cost, because I don't think the owner will do so, a replacement low paling open wooden fence about 2.5 feet high and 15 foot long, so that both adults and children can be readily seen. At the other end of the passageway, there is a low fence about 10 foot, and there isn't a problem at that end. And also, when the passageway used to have a pedestrian right-of-way notice on it, but that was taken down and the cycleway signs put up. What I would like to see is a pedestrian right-of-way sign put above the cyclists. Because one of the gentlemen nearly knocked me over, I shouted in his ear as he went by, was quite adamant that this was a cyclist right-of-way, and that he was totally unfazed that he might knock me down, or even a frail person, or a deaf person, or a blind person, and that pedestrians therefore had to look after themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Gates, can I ask whether you've seen the email that I arranged to be sent to you from...
Sorry.
Ah, right. There is one from Andrew Preston, who looks after the environmental improvement grants. So he has made a number of suggestions already, and we'd like to discuss those with you.
I'll be very happy to meet.
Yes, right. But he makes a number of points, and one of them is that there's a large degree of county council responsibility for these passageways. So unfortunately it's more complex than you'd probably like to believe. But I raised this subject with Mr. Preston some months ago, and he has got some suggestions which would be cheap and quick to install if we can get agreement with all the relevant authorities. So I think Lucy Netzinger wants to jump in here, but can we suffice it to say that we're on the case and we will talk to you?
I just want to get something started.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything has been gone nowhere. So
Yes.
I'm very happy to meet with Mr. Preston on site.
Yeah. Righto.
Okay. I wanted to say the same, that it is actually, this is the total
responsibility for this is a county council thing, which doesn't mean that the city can't help a great deal in trying to fix what is obviously quite a serious problem. And I'm very grateful that it's been raised here because it does look like a seriously unsafe piece of access. I think that the specific point I wanted to make is that there is somebody at the county council who is particularly responsible for safe routes to school. And this particular issue, given an excellent photograph, would clearly come under her remit, and it would be worth contacting her about this issue as well as talking to Andy Preston about it. And I will, I will dig out her contact details and let you have them signed.
Thank you, and for the minutes, that will clearly go down as an action point. So, Mr. Gates, thank you very much. Someone at the back, please hand up, but we have got a sheet of questions ready to go. So, have you already submitted a question? But go on, since you've... How are we doing for time? We've got...
Yeah, could councillors just give an update on what's happening with the ranking system on St Andrews Street, which was indicated to be installed mid-November at the last meeting, please?
Yes, I reported back to the last meeting that the police were continuing to monitor and occasionally intervene.
There's a system to be put in to taxis when there's a space for the rank.
Right, we'll look to Colin for an answer.
I think we've got a bit of slippage. The last report, this will be in by the end of March because there won't be any money after then. I noticed that some work has started at Drummer Street because the ramp needs to reverse there and there's some white lines being painted there. The technology is probably the production of that for installation is probably what we're now waiting for.
Well, we were told it was
this came up at the taxi forum, which I attend as the chair of licensing, but we didn't have a more precise date. Then it will have to be by the end of March, which should be soon, I'm afraid. So I think the action point in the minutes is to get a more accurate estimate to report back to from the county council. It's the county council team.
Thanks, Colin, and thanks for bringing that back.
Some progress has been made.
Okay, thank you. Martin Lucas Smith. Is he... Oh,
My second is favourite.
yes.
Hello committee, I'm speaking on behalf of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign as its chair. We basically want to welcome the lights instead of tickets scheme, which we think is working very well. It's a good way to solve the problem of cyclists without lights and in a low bureaucracy way, such that the police can actually deal with people without lights. It means that people that address end up with lights in the end, and in general seems to be working well. Firstly, will the committee give continued support to that scheme? And secondly, what other actions should the police be taking on things like speeding vehicles, people parking on cycle lanes, taxis and so on, so that there isn't a misconception that there is a particular focus on only one type of vehicle user or the other?
I think this calls for a letter to Steve Poppet, the police inspector responsible, but he will be at the next meeting. But I think it's only fair to write at this point so that they can not only address the issue but have made progress before then. I take your point about the recent campaign. I can only say that I'm not encouraged by it. The problem seems to be even worse than ever before with cyclists riding without lights. I think giving them the option of the lights is no longer a severe enough penalty. No. Rod?
I think on the other points in terms of other road users, I think it's a very valid point. I think if I recall, the police commissioner, when he was here in front of this committee, did state that he was a big supporter of 20 miles an hour, and I think that's something we should reinforce. and perhaps a letter to the police commissioner, because I think he was on Regent Street with the police officers when they were doing the enforcement on lights and tickets. I think we should also write to the police commissioner and indicate that, what steps is he doing in terms of other vehicle users.
Would you care to propose one?
Happy to, Chair, always happy to.
Please do. And pass it to me.
Mr. Chairman, I think my question is quite apposite to
Right, and you're the very next one on the list, so would you like to
one
take
bit
the
of
floor?
administration, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
more thing we were quite about in this,
If only. Martin, can we have your paperback for...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Norton, co-chairman of Brunswick Northcote Residents Association. I believe, and it's just been confirmed, this next time this committee meets, the police will make a report on policing in our area. They will provide an opportunity to review and set policing priorities for the next period. I want you in advance to consider adding the enforcement of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, specifically, of course, in Maze Causeway, Newmarket Road, but also not limited to adjoining streets where we know speeding is a problem, namely Jesus Lane, Emmanuel Road, and I know other people would say, well, we should do the whole of the town centre. Just to be clear, since the 20-mile-an-hour limit came into being in Maze Causeway in August 2010, the police have never enforced the 20-mile-an-hour limit on Maze Causeway, Newmarket Road. They have only done patching enforcement of a 30 limit, even though there's a 20 limit there. Various reasons have been given for this failure, but I believe all those have been now tackled and the improved signage is in place, as you've probably been seeing on the road. It's very clear. We've got red surfacing and we've got roundels on the road surface. And I believe the police are satisfied with this signage. I will speak on this next time, but I wanted you please to consider this matter in advance of that occasion, so it won't be a surprise to you next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Richard Taylor, you've got 2 questions. Which one would you like to ask?
So I'd like to suggest that when the Jesus Green toilets are refurbished, that they're built in a tough enough manner that they can be opened later. So currently the toilets there are open only till sort of mid-afternoon, even during the summer, and even the new toilets that you've been putting in around the city close at 8 p.m. So I saw that there was a report on the refurbishment of the pavilion went to the Central Scrutiny Committee, and it surprised me that there wasn't, in that report it didn't stress the opening hours being extended was one of the main sort of outcomes of refurbishing the toilets. I'd like it to be.
Right, I'm not sure if the tape is on. Yes, would you? Who's the appropriate officer? Jean Taylor? Yes. Jean Sanson.
Mr. Taylor.
No, I know what you... Right, okay. Andrew? Yes. Have you got the...
I did have this a few years ago when we made some of this decision. The problem is it isn't just robustness that's required to manage late opening of toilets, because the problems of abuse of all sorts do increase late at night. Unfortunately, typically if you try to go after the pub's closed, the council, I think the latest opening was at the ones at Drummond Street, and they all found it unaffordable in the state of local government finance today to manage the facility to go that late. The point's also been made, speaking to Chair of Licensing, that if people are going to licensed premises, they should be using the loos in those licensed premises. It's not like during the day when there are shoppers going to shops that you don't expect to have toilets, and people are going to pubs and restaurants that are expected to have toilets, and people should be expected to use them.
Tim Big.
I just wanted to say that I think we should refer the question from Mr Taylor to the Executive Councillor who's not from this area and ask for a review response from her, because if it is the case, as Mr Taylor says, that they're sometimes closing in the middle of the afternoon, it's not really covered by what Councillor Rosenthal said. I think I would like a proper explanation for my own benefit, if not Mr Taylor's.
So is it a review of the hours of operation of public toilets that you're specifically asking for? I think we need a specific goal to get our teeth into here.
Well, when you're spending the money on refurbishment, let's have them tough enough so you can open them later, because that's the reason I've been given in the past as to why they're not open later. And Doug Collins' point doesn't really stand, because this is Jesus Green. People go there during the day in the summers, and you're closing them at 5 o'clock or so.
Never mind. Can we take this away from the meeting and at least have some dialogue between yourself and Councillor Swanson?
I will, yes. Either I will deal with it or the Executive Council of the Public Toilets.
Right. Thank you. James Woodburns. Right. Okay. How are we doing for time? Sorry. Are we over? What are we doing? Oh, right. Richard Taylor's second question. So, Richard Taylor's second question.
On the Jesus Green toilets, it's the kind of thing I would have thought that you would have discussed before. I was surprised to see it go straight to Central Committee. But one of the reasons I follow what you do here is I want to keep up to date with what's changing on the green spaces in the West Central area. And I'm surprised that things like the toilets, like the bin you just heard about, and like, for example, the fluorescent path, that those kind of things don't get discussed here, and they just appear in the press or at the Central Committee meetings. The thing that I'd like to say is similar to what John Norton's saying. It's something in advance of the police coming next time. I'd like to make some suggestions of what you might want to ask them about, and things that if we just bring them up next time, they probably won't have answers to. So one is on taser use. The non-firearms police in Cambridge have been using tasers now since May. The North Area Committee have asked for the taser use to be included in their regular report, and I'd like to suggest that you ask for some information on how the police are using tasers. Particularly, are they going out in central Cambridge in the evenings? Is that primarily where they're being used, or are they primarily being used in a different context? Because I don't know, and I've been asking these questions. And the other question relates to today's news that the police have been trying to recruit a student to spy on the Cambridge University Students' Union. And I can't see anywhere else where the police can be held to account. But this is a local matter because it's in your area, and I thought it would be useful to ask the police what's going on next time, particularly as we've got at least a couple of councillors here who know what a students' union is. And I think it might help if Councillor Rosensteel and Councillor Smith explain to the police that a students' union is a statutory, democratic part of this city's civic infrastructure, and it's not something for them to be scared about, and not something that they should be seeking to spy on.
Right, well, I haven't seen that particular item in the newspaper, so I can't comment myself. Colin wants to.
I've seen very little of this too, and I'm not sure it's quite as Mr. Taylor has presented it to us. My understanding it was the police using methods which are not going to go to attempt to defend, but to investigate the activities of students, which they were suspicious about. I didn't think it was actually through the student union itself. The student union's got involved in defending its own members, which is a perfectly legitimate role for the student union to do, and I totally support that. I have to say that I remember when I was a student, and whenever there was a demo, there were certain familiar figures who were not students watching what was going on, and they were from MI5, I'm sure, or the special branch. So some things never change. They seem to be trying to use more subversive, more underhand methods to try and find out what's going on. I'm sure.
Could be sitting next to you.
I doubt what's being done would be very effective in what they're trying to do, which is to identify possible extremism of danger to the public in this country, which is a serious matter, which can't be totally ignored. But frankly, the student union will be very peripheral to that.
Right, well, the main danger here this evening is becoming cold and hungry. I would like to suggest we move on. Unless anybody, we've dealt with all the written questions. Does anybody else have anything to contribute at this particular moment? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 9, Dan, would you like to come and tell us about yourself and the project?
Thanks, Jen. My name is Dan Clark from Cambridgeshire County Council, and we're here today to gather suggestions for how to spend Section 106 contributions that we collect from developers. And the reason why we collect the area corridor transport contributions is to alleviate the impacts of additional trips that are created by development within the city. We need to allocate these contributions with having regard to the Community Infrastructure Levy Regulation 2010, Reg 122. So we need to make sure that any money that we spend, the projects are necessary to make development acceptable in planning terms, are directly related to development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind of development, and that they also meet the aims and objectives of the area corridor transport plans in alleviating the impact of additional trips, but also with an emphasis of any new transport capacity created in the corridor will be on pedestrians, cyclists and public transport. It won't increase car traffic in an area. It will increase the proportion of journeys made by bus, cycle and on foot, and manage the transport network efficiently and minimise the environmental and economic impacts of transport. So the West Area Committee covers a number of corridors. Mainly it covers the West Corridor, but also covers part of the Eastern and Southern corridors. And currently we have £156,874 in the Western Corridor to allocate, £239,199 in the Eastern Corridor, and £2.6 million in the Southern Corridor to allocate. We've got one ongoing scheme in the Western Corridor at the moment, which is ring road signage. There's also another scheme which falls into the Southern Corridor, which is contraflow cycling, and there are 3 streets which are affected within the West Area Committee, and that's Fitzwilliam Street, Adam and Eve Street, and Hampton Street, which borders this area. So we're here to collect suggestions for speakers.
Yes, I'll go first. But we are not tonight going to have a detailed street-by-street examination. Okay? This is you waving your flag saying, we're here, we've got funds.
Yeah.
Let's have your worked-up proposals.
Yeah. What we would like is for you to email us with what schemes you would like to see, because obviously we need quite a bit of detail so that we can start working them up into fuller schemes. We'll also probably need to meet with members as well to fully understand what they want to see.
Right, and my 2 specifics would be that you've tabled various projects, and we discussed it at the officers briefing, but the very first, under 3.1, Madingley Road cycleway improvement, original funding 246,000 complete. Now, the project as planned is not complete, it stopped because the money was used up.
Yeah. And sorry, that's just wording. The complete means that we've spent the allocation that we had, but
right.
Yes. So it's not complete. So it's about 60% complete. Yes.
Well, right.
It's a new problem.
Yes. So clearly, I'll follow up with perhaps several of us will, from the wards concerned, will write to you on that one. And can I just ask, since a lady called Vanessa Kelly did a presentation on the Huntingdon Road cycle scheme on Huntingdon Road today, I'd like to think that you will be linking up and talking to the people who've got that cycling city funding to see if you can get double benefit out of the combined effort. So that's my bit.
There are a number of pots that we could use to complete the Madingley Road scheme. If the city deal comes off, obviously we'll be looking at the Madingley Road corridor. There's also other cycling grants, so we can look at that.
Right, good. Now, yes, Sean.
We have discussed this from a Nina point of view beforehand, and Lucy's got a fantastic list of ideas. But I just want Georgina to Charles, if you could provide, perhaps provide me offline, what's the ring road signage proposal? Sorry, I haven't heard about it before. You may not want to go into detail now, but I'm a bit concerned about over-enthusiastic signage.
Yeah, certainly. I can provide more detail on the project.
Where we are.
Yeah, and circulate that to you. A comment?
The point, it's amazing how you raise a concern of residents. Thank you, friends of Midsummer Common, about path on Midsummer Common. You stumble into an arrangement for utilizing Section 106 money, which has probably disadvantaged this area rather, because the east area and south area have been looking at most of their corridor monies when some of it's ours. So we do need to be sure that that problem doesn't continue. I'm also completely baffled at the south area. But what we've got is all these villages outside Cambridge to the west. The south area doesn't include the other half of Trumpton Meadows, which is crazy. Because there must be a real need for corridor funds to go into development. But without time avoiding going into details, we must as a committee be careful to make sure that we have some money left over for our area, particularly as a lot of the trip generation is into the city centre from beyond our boundaries across some of these routes, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in some common being right.
I can go down my list very briefly. I would quite like to make them at this point. Top of my list was completion of the Vladimir Road cycle path, which is not complete. Second on my list is improved cycle facilities along Queen's Road. But this is just, I wouldn't necessarily like to say that this is in priority order. I think improved bus services for city residents are really important. And in your paper, you've got some things about changes to bus services. In fact, I don't think that the changes to the bus services in the recent years have in any way benefited city residents. They've benefited potentially people outside, but I think it's really important that city residents have decent bus services, because otherwise they get to make just like everyone else. Northampton Street and Magdalen Bridge is desperately in need of improved cycle access and pedestrian. I mean, it's just incredibly unsafe at the moment. And there are a number of areas in the city centre where I think increased awareness of bike priority routes is important. One of these was raised by my daughter, who cycles to school every day and has a terrible time in St Andrew Street and the area outside Boots and Next, where drivers are not aware that cycles are allowed to go in a contraflow, and she gets yelled at every morning. And so Junction, Mill Lane, Downing Street, Trumpington Street is also very dangerous. Trumpington Street, Fen Causeway roundabouts, and finally, when you're making your analysis, Councillor Reid would like to suggest that you look at the cycle accident statistics as part of the process. I hope that was brief enough.
That's fine, but what we desperately do need you to do is follow that up with details, so that it's not vague minutes that Dan is responding to. John, here, please.
I completely agree with what Lucy Metzinger has just said about the parts of the city where improvements, particularly for cyclists and the safety of cyclists, are required, and I heartily endorse that. All I would like to say, which is to complement something you said, Chair, earlier, which is that one of the hopes of the Huntington Road segregated cycling scheme is that it will be of such a high quality that cyclists who currently, or potential cyclists who do not feel sufficiently secure in the present arrangement, will find this so reassuring that they will confidently cycle where they might now hesitate. So there's a real hope that it will convert more potential cyclists to actually become cyclists. And the other thing which I think we need to bear in mind here is that the proposal as it presently stands on the Huntington Road is cash limited, and people are quite rightly suggesting that it ought to go further and certainly ought to deal with the lower part of the Huntington Road. And I think, the hope is that additional funds of this kind will be put into the pot and considered very carefully in conjunction with what is already proposed. So I'm simply endorsing what other councillors have said.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah.
That's it. That's the start.
I'm not sure whether we can add, but could I just add a very general comment on the fact that something which is cheap, there is growing problems between pedestrians and cyclists, and part of it is because the signage of the existing paths are practically non-existent. You take the path down Parker's Piece, where pedestrians and cyclists are supposed to go together, but you cannot see any of the signs, they've all worn away. So I think the first thing you could do with a little bit of money is to go around all the existing areas and make sure the signage is clear for people. This might help even more accidents between pedestrians and cyclists, because they just don't know who's supposed to be there.
Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, not at all. I'm hearing colleagues saying that's a maintenance problem.
I know.
Well, if it is, it needs doing. So thank you for mentioning it. And now Martin.
It's great to hear a number of schemes which would enhance cycle safety and hopefully pedestrian safety as well. I do agree with the lady who's just spoken. There are many places in the city where signage is extremely poor. That's certainly an issue that's been raised constantly in the north of the city on Milton Road, and as you say, there are many areas in the west central area as well that have that problem. I also want to endorse the comment John Hipkin has just made about the Huntingdon Road scheme. Although we haven't yet seen ourselves the final proposals, we do, at long last in this city, finally face the possibility of a scheme that actually meets some kind of national standards for cycling, and which segregates cyclists away from both cars and particularly pedestrians. In other words, a proper three-network approach: pedestrians, cycles, motorists, which hopefully will be the first time in the city where we can get rid of some of the sort of problems that are often alluded to. So I would very strongly endorse the idea that if there are funds that can be used to extend the scope of that scheme to help the very hard-working cycling team that are delivering that, I think that would be a good idea. I'd also just like to follow up the suggestion from Lucy Netzinger, I forgot the name right, sorry. You mentioned there some of the junctions on the ring road. I mean, the inner ring road is an absolute catalogue of cycle collisions, pedestrian collisions. Every single part of that is, if you look on the collision map, is just lots and lots of circles, lots and lots of circles. The double roundabout you mentioned has long been at the very top of the county's schemes that need doing. There are many things you could do there, not only removing the ridiculous one-way system through Newtown, but also in general sorting out that roundabout properly. And I think one of the valuable things that you could really do to deal with the problem of those is actually simply commission a study about how that whole inner ring road could be made cycle safe. Because the problem, every time we've raised the problem of those junctions is, we can't do this junction because it would affect traffic the next one up. And that's always been the blocker. And the only way to unlock that is to get a proper study that looks at that whole corridor joining Newmarket Road up to Newnham, basically that whole corridor as a proper scheme that could be very high quality for cycling, again, proper segregation or whatever, in a way that makes cycling on there a lot quicker and a lot safer, and as a result of that would also get people out of their cars for many of the journeys that go on there. And we all know how congested that is. And until we address the safety there, that congestion is never going to be fixed. And so I would strongly recommend something like a £50,000 study to actually look at that as a proper, an overall scheme. And even if it takes several years to address the particular junctions, at least there will be a kind of overall plan there.
Right, thanks. I was going to take Richard. I really need to... The whole point of this is to flag up the fact that there's a new process, it's a consultation. We want your views in, we want detailed emails to your preferred councillors or direct to Dan so that we can get a scheme in place. But Richard?
Yes, just echoing really the previous speaker.
I was thinking more from a pedestrian point of view on the inner ring road, but there are numerous hazards, and so it's pedestrians, cyclists, motorists. The particular one I had in mind was Mount Pleasant, Shelley Row and so on, where there are residents who are stuck on an island between the two directions of the inner ring road, and maybe that scheme is already agreed and going forward separately, possibly, but that was the one I wanted to raise as an example.
Thanks. That is under investigation by Andy Preston. And yes, would you like to sort of very quickly, please?
Class Boomer. I heard that Patterson Street going to be converted into two-way for cycling. If you do that, please don't leave out the last bit of Union Road between Patterson Street and Alfreda Street. Very easy, but when you're in that area, otherwise it doesn't make sense.
John, I think, will you sort of draw a line on this for us?
What I wanted to just do was ask a process question, which is I think the idea of using money to commission studies is a good idea, because it gives us a way of really carrying out expenditures way beyond this structural expenditure. And I wondered whether Section 106 money could be used to fund studies of the type that Martin suggested.
Yeah, it can be. The East Area Committee have asked us to put £50,000 towards a study at the Eastern Gateway Market Rate. So,
right, Dan, do you think you've triggered enough activity here?
Yes.
But it is up to us all as individual councillors to encourage our own residents to come back with their ideas and to help channel these through to the county. So thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
Tim, come and join us at the table. So we are now at the final agenda item, number 10, developer contributions, devolved decision making, second round priority setting for this area. Tim, bring us up to date and tell us what we've got to do.
Chair, thank you. The minutes of the meeting that you have agreed provide a short list of 10 proposals, with 2 of them allocated funding thus far. This report is about priority setting. For the avoidance of doubt, I need the Area Committee to confirm the prioritisation of the St Augustine's and St Mark's Church Hall projects, and identify 2 other projects from the shortlisted options that the Area Committee wishes to prioritise. The options are set out in Table 2 on page 5. Just on the 2 I've mentioned, St Mark's and St Augustine's Church Halls, I need to provide an update that St Mark's has been successful in the tree appeal, allowing the wider project for St Mark's to go forward. The recommendation in this report is for up to 150,000 of community facilities improvements. We need to say the up to in both cases for these, just in case the community facilities elements don't go that far. That's all that's about. For St Augustine's, the project is about the extension of the church hall and upgrade to facilities. That's how it's described in the appendix. It should have been in the table as well. St Augustine's, it is proposed that would be for up to £100,000 of community facilities improvements. The report gave the impression that that money might be reduced depending on the overall scale of the scheme. If there is up to £100,000 of community facilities work, that would qualify for the community facilities funding. So I hope that helps to clarify that point. The other options that you have in front of you, I've highlighted a number that aren't ready for consideration yet, although in the recommendations on, I think that is 2.3 and 2.4, try to highlight those recommendations, those proposals not yet ready for consideration, but to be able to take those forward for you. We then get into the issues of the other options that you're being asked to identify 2 of those to take forward, and this is on the basis of making sure that the overall number of priorities that you have is within the manageable and achievable within the staffing capacity available for the overall programme across all the areas. So the table on pages 8 and 9 sets out those options. I have highlighted a number of issues within that table for you to consider. I would provide an update at this stage that I've heard back from the Friends of Histon Road Recreation Ground, who have highlighted that of the options suggested, the climbing frame and additional play equipment would be their first priority. And they, as a second priority, they would also be interested in additional seating and bird nest boxes. They've highlighted no need for additional notice boards at the moment, and also the idea of a trim trail would take a lower priority at this stage as well. So the 2 they're really highlighting are the climbing frame and the additional seating and bird nesting boxes. So that's that point to highlight. Just on pages 8 and 9, there's mention of the electricity supply options for Parker's Piece. I've been asked to point out that whilst there are opportunities for linking to the lighting conduits along Parker's Piece, the £60,000 plus option for a substation on Parker's Piece would need to be considered in the context of the conservation area. So that's why we have framed that option as we have done. Now, I would just, members, what I'm trying to do with all of this is to try and make what it can be a very complicated area as simple as we can make it. So, on page 10, I've tried to set out the options that I think you have of which ones, from what you've previously said at this meeting and previously, which two to prioritise, the St Augustine's and St Mark's, and then highlighting within the other suggestions on pages 8 and 9 what I think you might be the main choices, given issues not least on lighting for the Driftway and the wider path between Barton Road and Trumpeton Road, some considerable issues around public realm funding and the lack of funding availability for everything that you want to do there. So I've tried to set that out there. I hope that's clear, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I was going to propose that we go just cut to the chase and approve those first 2 and then proceed. But Rod has got a question on process, first of all.
Chair, I'm very familiar with the resource issues. It is a big issue, and look, we look at this through a certain prism as West Central, and all the other area committees look through different prisms, and the officers have to bring all that together and manage resources across. My only point, though, is that I think we've always had the view that for example, the community facility type projects are projects where we as an authority don't really take the lead. We're in effect relying on third parties to actually action all that work. Now, in effect, the key benefit those third parties get is a check from us. Now, clearly there are certain contracts that have to be met, certain obligations, and that is officers' time. But if you were to weight the amount of resource required to deliver those first 2 projects, I think I would argue that actually it's not a large amount. It's not a large amount. From my experience in terms of looking at previous projects, it's not a large amount relative to some of the more complex projects that we see in terms of the other category. So my only question, therefore, is, are we right in saying that as a result of taking those 2, we've in effect allocated 2 of our 4? Or can we say, well, actually, those 2 are really 1, and actually we could take 3 from the list below rather than just 2? I know I know, look, there's no set rule. I know it's about how much resource, but I am aware of other area committees who have done that in the past. And so I think really it's guidance from the officer and actually seeing whether or not, though that resource constraint can be flexed in some way.
Well, I think I know what Tim's going to say, and I want to support him in what he will say, because I know that other officers are saying that these projects will indeed take up considerable resources, and we haven't got carte blanche just to approve these and then go for extra projects. So, but Tim, would you like to put that into your own words?
Chair, if I'd known that I'd have your full support without saying anything, this might have been hair washing night after all. But thank you for that. In terms of I think there are three issues in terms of we've thought carefully about this one because I anticipated that question coming up. The workload is an issue, particularly in the context of within each service the staffing that they have available to deal with these issues. Now, within community development, they have, I believe, it's half a post to deal with all of these schemes. So, although it may not seem that it is, in the greater scheme of things, onerous within the capacity that there is within that service, that is an issue. And some of these projects do take will take a considerable amount of time in terms of working with the community groups to go through community use agreements and the grant work there. So I appreciate the point, but I'm just trying to put it in that wider context. My other concern, because I think that the point that Councillor Cantrell made was a really important one about the role of the other area committees, that I'm not just working on with the relationship with West Central, but all the other area committees. And if one area committee says, can we have more priorities, all the other area committees will want more priorities, not necessarily looking just at the community facilities ones. So I have a duty to the Executive Councillor to make sure, as I did previously, that I am highlighting the need to make sure that there is a system that is manageable and achievable across the board. Having said that, one of the key points that I've tried to highlight in the report is that if we find, and I think it's in paragraph 3.5 where I've said this, if it becomes clear by next spring that depending on which priorities you are highlighting now, if some of those look as though that they can be taken forward fairly straightforwardly, and there could be more capacity for this committee to consider more second round priorities, then that can be considered. But you will forgive me for taking a cautious approach, because I need to make sure, as I have done with all previous executive councillors, that I'm not causing difficulties for the overall council approach.
Can I just make an observation, Chair? I think it's true that we were the only area committee in the last cycle of this exercise, which was done about 9 months ago, that actually stayed within that criteria. Other area committees, so for example, South Area Committee, they did do a number of other projects because those projects were very small. One project, for example, was a set of goalposts on Cherryhampton Road Rec, for example. So I just fear that unfortunately this committee is for whatever reason, is shouldered with the fact that we stick within the narrow parameters, and that's partly because the current and the previous executive councillor actually sit on this committee. But what I would like to see is then, to the extent we have to go just 2 from the 4, I think we should use the opportunity to have, in this meeting, to actually select another 1 or 2 which sit outside the priority but can come in later on to the extent there is capacity.
Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo what Simon said. I think we've got an officer here who's talking about resources and giving us an idea of what can be done. We need to listen to it. But I wouldn't be against sort of teeing up some other projects, with, given that there is a proviso that if, capacity, if there is capacity that we can take them on. I think that makes absolute sense. But for tonight, to limit ourselves to 2 additional projects makes sense. I had a question about Parker's Piece, the project D on table 2. You've got the 40K figure here. Am I right in understanding that when I look at the table on page 8, D2, so there is an option to actually do a version of this that doesn't require a substation. Is that right? And that's the 40K option. It's just the 60K option that would require a substation.
Chair, that's right.
Richard Lawton wanted
John Lawton.
John, sorry. John.
I'm concerned to see the options for power supplies on Christ's Pieces and Parker's Pieces. Sorry. No, I thought it was Christ's Pieces. To allow for the certain venues and things, the use of power sources rather than diesel generators. The proposal to put an ice rink on Christ's Pieces failed because there was no adequate power supply available for that. And it was spun that it was to do with residents disapproving of it, but there was no power supply. It was dead in the water from the very beginning. The person who put forward the idea for the ice rink said that he wanted to have a mains power supply. He would not run it on generators. It's too expensive to run it on generators. And if he wants to have the ice rink on Christ's Pieces or Parker's Piece, he needs to have an adequate power supply. The power supply proposals in that specifically state they would not be adequate for an ice rink. So I don't know why you consider wasting the money on a facility that is not of use to the one thing which people want and actually it would require. So I think it's wasted money. It's somewhat bizarre to consider a substation on Parker's Piece. I think perhaps it could be found elsewhere and the cable run in. Obviously we're not looking at that massive a cable, but it would be a useful facility. I'm not against power, it makes a lot of sense, but I think the option to have an inadequate facility is completely wasted. If you're putting conduits in for these new lights, which I've opposed, but you're putting it in, put conduit in that would take the cable, that will supply the power that's enough for the job for an ice rink. And then you've done that job. And then the issue of the substation or not is something that would have to be looked at. But there's no point wasting money on something that won't do the job. That's my point.
Is this directly relevant to John's point?
Absolutely.
Right.
The problem with D2 is it's neither fish nor fowl. But first of all, I don't see any problem finding a location for a substation. The council owns a substantial lump of land at Hobbs Pavilion, which is mostly filled with cars at the moment. If we cannot find space for a substation by displacing a couple of cars, we're not doing very well in my view. And there's only a technical question as to whether that's close enough to the demand for power and peace. However, this is for council strategic citywide events on Parker's Piece, so it's not appropriate for this area committee's Section 106 monies. So Christ's Piece is a complete red herring, it's nothing to do with it at all. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So I say I don't think we should do Parker's Piece out of this funding, but we should do it for all sorts of reasons which are strategic and not to do with West Central specifically.
Okay, we'll come back to all the options, but I've got John Hipkin next.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say how pleased I am, and I'm sure others are too, about the certainty which we've now given to our 2 top priorities, which is this Augustine Church Hall improvements and the same at St Mark's Church Hall. When I look at further possibilities, I'd like to put in a plea for the Histon Road Rec improvements because, I mean, we know how extremely well used that facility already is, but I would like to remind people who are talking about this side of the city and its
comparative need profile compared with other sides of the city and so on. We are going to take the bulk of new growth in the city on this side, on the northwestern side. And we're opening up an access along Windsor Road into the new NIAB site where there are going to be 2,000 new dwellings. And a great many of those family homes will have young children in them. And their nearest recreation ground, apart from anything that will be provided on site, will be the Histon Road Rec. So I think anything which will update that and improve it and make it an even better facility is one that we should consider supporting.
Thanks, John.
No, not huge.
Yes, but offline. Thanks, John. Needless to say, I see completely eye to eye with you on this rare issue. Julie Smith.
Briefly, I would like to suggest that we need to stick with the 4 projects. When we reach a time when projects are delivered on time and on budget and we don't see slippage, I would look to recommend we add more projects in. But at the moment, I think we need to get a good track record of being able to deliver on projects. So I think we should limit ourselves. If we have a few, as we do, H, I and J, that are not ready yet but explore further, I think there's no harm at all in having those on the list. But if we have A and B as our 2 priorities that have been accepted, I would like to make a case for saying we should support the solar studs. If Councillor Rosenstiel is really saying that the Parker's Peace item should be sent off for central funding, can the 3 Histon Road Rec improvements be put together as a single item?
Yeah.
And
it
possibly, I
comes out
think,
as a single item in the...
yeah, a rope pulley at Lammasland is perhaps not as high a priority. It's only £6,000. That's only £6,000. I'm sure that could be found in other ways. But at least it's a proposal for moving forward.
Thank you. John?
Julie's spoken for Newnham, really. I mean, obviously we're delighted with the smart hall. That's one of our priorities. Land lighting has been another one of our priorities for a long time, and we're pleased on the not ready yet that those projects are being explored. You know, the rope pulley at Lammasland, I wouldn't call it a ward priority. I mean, it doesn't seem terribly complicated if it could be done, but I wouldn't class it as a ward priority. I mean, I would like to say in the first round of projects that we approved at this committee, that we didn't have a Newnham specific round project at all. And so in the second round, you know, I think there is a case for the committee to think of having a couple of projects for Newnham, the St Mark's and the Lammasland solar studs. And I just want to say, as with my lead member of the JDCC hat on, there is a lot of thought's gone into the provision of public open space on the new development sites.
Rod?
I also support the solar studs, just in relation to the plus point. I think actually in relation to solar studs from Barton Road to Trumpington Road, which is the driftway and so forth, I'm not sure solar studs are what we're really talking about. I think there needs to be a more carefully thought through approach to that. So I think it's lighting that route, part of which may be solar studs, but part of which may also have to be some form of more formal lighting. And if you recall, in the previous meeting, we talked about possibly an environmental improvement project funding in combination with developer contribution. And just so we're clear, solar studs along, because it is a bit confusing, solar studs along the diagonal path. It's only one path along Lammasland. We don't want to create a cross so that planes land there. Just one way.
Right. Okay. No,
and I also agree that the electricity improvement really is a citywide scheme.
Okay. Right. Let's get into a bit of a process here. Let's go down this list and cross things out. So We're crossing out D. For the time being, we know... Oh, sorry?
Just D2. It's just purposes.
Oh, yes. Yes, crossing out D2. Road pulley, not at this time. And I and J, not at this time. So what have we got left? H. Right.
I and J terribly vague.
Yes, right.
Can I just say, in things which are currently on the 4, they sit in a category between not ready yet but explore further and the ones we choose. So it comes back to this point that if there is capacity later on, we've already allocated 2 schemes out of that 4 that will sit and we can actually... So let's just have a category. We don't have to decide which of those schemes, but they don't just get dropped completely. They sit in a below.
Well, yes. But for tonight, I'm now looking for 2 definite priorities, and then the others that we've not put a line through at this stage get. They get.
There's a simple choice here. The question that we need to know the answer to before we make it is whether the solar studs are a viable solution to the problems on the model is on the guided busway just which I'm not familiar with.
Well,
certainly the problem at Lampsland is the 2 dark corners that are a source of conflict between cyclists and pedestrians. But whether what's on the guided busway, which is well spoken of, is good enough, I'm not qualified to comment because I don't have the information.
No, and I can certainly vouch that the solar studs between Girton and Oakington are absolutely brilliant.
Yes. As a ward councillor who's spent a lot of time on this, I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Go on then.
Thank you. The answer is that it is sufficient for that particular route, partly for what the chair has said, but also the issue on that route is just in relation to pedestrians and cyclists, knowing that each one's there. There is a white line, so unlike on Midsummer Common and so forth, there is a clear delineation. But at night, basically, you can't see the pedestrians until you're on top of them. So actually, those solar studs act. It's not a safety issue, because Lampsland is very safe. It's basically just so that people can see each other. It's also sufficiently low-level lighting that it's not really intrusive in the sense of light pollution. So I think it's an ideal solution. It does really work also on the guided bus route, because I've used it in the dark, and it's fantastic on the guided bus route.
But there's no escaping from the fact that if cyclists have proper lights, see and be seen, it is.
Sorry, Chair. In this instance, it's not cyclists, it's pedestrians. Are you suggesting that pedestrians should have lights?
See and be seen. If the cyclists have got lights, they will be seen.
Is there anything that
Come on then. So, we are going to have to vote on some of these.
Are we reaching a consensus? Is the reason my question. Are we got to the point where we can agree E1 and F on the distant road ones, and we can agree C4 on this distant on page 10 and go on?
Yes. I agree with that.
Tim?
Chair, I need to be clear when we're talking about the solar studs on the path at Lampsland. There were 2 sets of paths that were mentioned in the beginning of this option. One was the driftway, and one was there was talk at the last meeting of members wanting certainly the crossing of the 2 paths on the Lampsland. Right. So are you talking about?
So the minutes. Can I just say the minutes have altered on that?
Right.
Yeah, the minutes are not about putting lighting at that crossroads path in the middle of Lampsland. The minutes are very clear now that it's about lighting along the path. And the idea that we just put lighting on the crossroads has never been, I don't think, in any single ward councillor's minds.
So the path we are now talking about is the driftway?
No, Chair. Just so we're clear, there is a cycle path which cuts diagonally from Newnham Road to Fen Causeway. It's at the corner, yes, it's Newnham Road to Fen Causeway. It is basically the junction of Newnham Road and Barton Road where it starts. It then bends, it goes between the tennis court and the bowling green and reaches Fen Causeway. That is the piece of path that we're talking about. Driftway is something completely different, not even on Lammas Land. It sits alongside Lammas Land down to the river.
So,
what would we know?
Anyway,
can we just minute that, because it's at this time in the evening where we make mistakes, and then we spend a lot of time trying to correct this problem, and I'm very frustrated by it, Chair.
Right. Now we have 3 projects. We have 3 projects still in the system, don't we? And we've got to cut that down to 2 with 1 reserve.
I thought I just suggested a way forward.
No, I didn't know.
Which was 2 plus the 2 we've already agreed. It was the solar studs, and we've just agreed where the solar studs go.
Yes.
And the Histon Road rec items, not including the trim tray.
Yes. So
or the notice board. And that's it, isn't it?
What about D1?
No, D1 we've already agreed that it's sufficiently small that it'll be found elsewhere. It's only a long extension lead, basically.
Oh, I thought it was just D2.
Right. That we put that through as a proposition to the vote. Yes.
I think two ways to say something.
Chair, if I can help, if you're saying that Parker's Piece is a strategic park, is Jesus Green not equally strategic?
Yes.
So if you are suggesting that, could both be put to the Executive Councillor through the Scrutiny Committee to consider for citywide funding?
Yes.
That
So
would seem to take both
D's gone.
D1 and D2 out of the equation now.
All right. C, E, and F.
C4, I think, just to be completely accurate, I think we are talking about the diagonal path.
Yes.
Not the diagonal path.
And it's the diagonal path with the cycle path on it, because there are other diagonal paths on Lammas Land. And I suggest that before we go any further, ward councils are consulted with a plan, because there is a lot of opportunity for error. I don't want us to be solar light in a park, but we didn't want the solar light.
And this is subject to consultation, etc.
We're there, aren't we? Right. And I think it's worth reinforcing the message to the people who've been kind enough to turn up and listen to all this, that none of the other projects are being dismissed out of hand. It's just they've sunk back into a stage where they'll have to be reprioritised at some future point, but in competition with other projects that come through.
Chair, I need you to go back to the recommendations in section 2, and just so we can make sure that everything is signed off here, that I take it that you are confirming the priorities for St Mark's and St Augustine's as set out in paragraph 2.1. Good. I take it... Is that okay? In recommendation 2.2, which asked for 2 other shortlisted options. The ones that you have highlighted, if I can find it, are C4, the solar studs along the diagonal path singular on Lammas Land, the cycle path. Yes. And we will work with members just to make sure that we have very clear understanding. Yes. Cycle. The other one is the combination of the climbing frame and which is F, and the reference to the nesting boxes, and I just need to double check because they have asked for additional seating and bird nesting boxes plus the climbing frame. So that is taking out of E1 the notice boards and taking out the trim trail, so that's the seating and the nesting boxes and the climbing frame, and that is the other of your priorities here. Now going to recommendation 2.3, it's instructing officers to look at the play area provision in North Newnham, and 2.4 is to look at the options for sports facilities in the area with a team focus and with a Newnham focus. The reason for that is that you have a considerable amount of devolved sports facilities money that we need to address in due course. But at this stage, you're just